Good morning, everyone. We are welcome to this webinar. We are glad to have everybody here. Our webinar is titled Advocating for Your Child. So PRI is a faith-based, non-denominational organization committed to helping parents fulfill their God-given role of raising well-rounded children. We enable thriving families with excellent parent-child communication in a conducive environment where a child's potentials are maximized. Our mission is to encourage, support, and provide resources for parents to raise children who will be spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally sound. Okay, so today we have two very great women who are going to be speaking with us. So I'm going to introduce the first person, and her name is Moji Ogunsoya. She is currently a director in the Real Assets and Private Investment Operations Group of the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. Prior to joining CPP Investment, she spent 6 years as a controller at Lumira Capital Corporation, a private equity company. She started her career with KPMG, where she completed her accounting training, leading to progressively senior roles in finance, corporate accounting, audit, and financial services. She holds a BSc in accounting and is also a certified professional accountant in Canada and Nigeria, as well as a certified management accountant in the United States. Outside of her work, she serves as a treasurer on the board of the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. Please welcome virtually Mrs. Moji Ogunsoya. We are glad to have you here. So the next person is Dr. Amberly Evans. She's a Stone Mountain native and she graduated from DeKalb County High School. She recently obtained her PhD from Mercer University in Curriculum and Instruction. Prior to attending Mercer, she attended the University of Georgia, Go Dogs, where she earned her bachelor's in elementary education, and then in Georgia State University, where she received her master's in reading, language, and literacy. She's currently an academic coach with previous experience in the classroom. She has a passion for literacy, linguistic justice, and educating parents on the inner workings of the public education system. She's a part of many initiatives, and at the end of this webinar, she's going to tell us about one of them and actually invite us. So Dr. Evans, you're very welcome. We're glad to have you. So without wasting any time, I'm going to go ahead. It's going to be a Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and ask both of them these questions, and I'm going to stop sharing now. So I'm just going to ask the questions, and anyone can answer, but just to kick off, I would start with Dr. Evans. And I'll say the first question is, what is advocacy? What is advocacy? In general layman language, what is advocacy?
So to me, advocacy is having the privilege to use your voice to speak out on things that you support, and asking others to listen to your perspectives and your concerns about a specific topic, and using that power and privilege to have them listen to you so that you can then encourage them to think about something in a different perspective.
Thank you. And Mrs. Ogunsoya, from you?
Yeah, along the same line, I think advocacy is just defending another person's rights, their needs, their interest. I'm speaking up when the other party is either unable to, unwilling to, or in some cases, they're not even aware that they need an advocate.
Awesome, awesome. So when we talk of advocacy in terms of children, what does that mean? What do we expect, or what does that imply?
So if I look at children, so I think for children, advocacy is key and extremely important, because for children, they're extremely vulnerable to abuse, and abuse can be physical, it can be emotional. So they are likely not also, able to speak for themselves. And one thing I find very disturbing, especially for children, is that, decisions we make for children have lifelong effects on them. So you find that sometimes making decisions for them at a particularly young age, can change the trajectory of their lives. So it's very, very important for, children at a young age to have advocates all around them. So either their parents, their teachers, their doctors, everybody surrounding them should have the mindset that, okay, whatever decision we're making for these children now has a future impact.
You, Dr. Evans?
Yeah, I second all of that. I definitely agree that children oftentimes are the most vulnerable populations in various settings. And so it is very important that when we think about advocating for children, we think about protecting them, protecting their innocence, their joy, protecting their rights to equitable opportunities within different spaces, in specifically in school, in the context of this conversation. So when advocating for them, it is, like I mentioned before, using that voice and power that you have as an adult in the room to then give them voice that they typically would not have as a vulnerable population who is often unheard or may not have the language or skills to know how to advocate for themselves. So that's when we become that that person, that advocate for them, to give them the access to what they need. And as Ms. Moji said before, sometimes even not knowing what they need, but knowing from our perspective as we live this life longer than they have, what they may need in the future and how we can advocate for that now so that they will get those opportunities as time goes on.
Absolutely. So not just for now, but even for the future. Thank you both. So are there specific categories of children that need advocacy, or do all children need advocacy?
I definitely think all children need advocacy. There are some who have different needs within the umbrella of advocacy and what needs to be advocated for them, but all children are vulnerable to, as mentioned before, they're vulnerable to abuse mentally, physically, emotionally. Some of them that may just be within their homes, within school systems. Some of that may be systematically embedded within the community or the nation at large. So they may need an additional advocacy within that particular system of injustices, but all children definitely need advocates for them.
Yeah, and Mr. Gonsoya, what do you think?
Absolutely. I agree with Dr. Evans. So all children need advocacy. Children who are really smart need advocates to ensure that they achieve their highest potential. Children who are struggling need advocates. Children with special needs, need even more advocacy because, they are very, very vulnerable. Like even the systemic barriers that's been placed in front of them, right? So I think every child at any stage in their lives need advocates. Children in elementary school, children in high school, need advocates.
So that's kind of a segue into my next question. So what kind of parental involvement is necessary or appropriate for different grades or age, So maybe, okay, elementary, high school, maybe even college. Is it the same? Should we expect the same, or do we have different expectations? I'll let Dr. Evans go first since she's the educator. Considering your perspective as an educator, do you think there should be different levels of advocacy? Maybe at some point we should let them figure out things on their own at some age or at some point or at some grade. What do you think?
Yeah, I think naturally we tend to believe that as children get older, then we step back a little bit more and allow them to advocate for themselves. And then to some degree, I do think that is true. You'd want to give them the skills to learn how to advocate for themselves so that at one point when they are an adult, they know how to do that. But I don't like the idea of thinking that advocacy or parental involvement decreases. I just like this. I'd rather say it shifts. Where the weight of the advocacy then shifts on maybe the child is now advocating a little bit more, but the parent is still there as a support, rather they're giving them feedback, giving them advice of how to go and advocate for themselves. So rather than being the forefront, the face of the advocacy, that starts to that shifts where now the student may be the face of their own advocacy, where the parent is behind them. I can think of times when I was in college and I still needed my mom to come and advocate for me, to come and sit in the financial aid rooms because I didn't understand the jargon, because they weren't listening to what I was saying. And so I needed someone who was a little more powerful than me, that they saw had a little more prestige than I did, to come and advocate for me on my behalf. So then it shifted again, where I was initially the person trying to advocate for myself. When that wasn't working, my mom, her involvement was still there because I was still the person talking to her, relaying all the messages. When that shift needed to happen, then it just kept going back and forth that way. Obviously, when you have younger students, that shift is probably less likely to happen. You're probably more consistently the face of the advocacy. And as they get older, you start to allow them to be more of the face while you're in the background. But so that's kind of how I like to imagine that advocacy, I guess, progression, or the parental involvement progression, is less of one thing is decreasing while one is increasing, but more of this ongoing shift to allow students the opportunity to learn those skills that they'll need to advocate for themselves once they are adults.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mr. Ogunsoya.
Yes, I second everything Dr. Evans said. And I think one thing I would like to add is that our children looking at us when they're young, when they see us advocating, when they see people around them advocating for them, that has the capabilities of building in them that need for self-advocacy as they grow. Right. So, I mean, I know that for a fact. And sometimes, you know, when these children are in universities, they might not even think that they need advocates. I mean, I can't imagine going to the university with my son. It would be like, whoa, back off. What's your problem?
Come here.
Don't come here. What's your problem? But at the end of the day, it's if they've seen you, you know, be that advocate for them growing up, then you've instilled in them that ability, that self-confidence, so that when they're in a position, you know, to advocate for themselves, they're not shying away. They're not afraid to speak up, but it's also knowing that you've built that relationship with them over time, that they know when to reach out to you or when they need to reach out to somebody else, you know, to say, this is not working, I need help here, right? But it's that, you know, growth from like a young age to when they are supposed to be independent, but they still need help.
Thank you. So at what age would you think that we can start making that shift, you know, shifting from the parent being the face of the advocacy and the totality of the advocacy, and letting the child begin to take some role, play a part in the advocacy, you know, even if we are still behind the scenes and, you know, telling them what to say or what to do? At what age would you suggest that we begin to allow some input from the children?
So I would say right from the get-go, from a very young age, you know, it all depends on the need and the impact of the advocacy. So from somebody, maybe a 3-4-year-old in kindergarten, you know, somebody comes and snatches something from you, your mom is not there, right? So it's we at that point in time, we should be instilling in them the need to be their own person. They need to speak up for themselves. So, and that progresses as they age, because I don't think advocacy stops at any time. It's just that from a young age, you know, we have age appropriate advocacy. They can advocate for themselves between their peers. They probably might need a parental advocacy when it comes to dealing with teachers and the school system. But, you know, as they grow, you know, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, you know, it's I mean, even on the playground, you know, it's instilling in them that, okay, you can advocate for yourself, but then also letting them know at what point to invite a parent in, so that the parent is now doing that job with another teacher. But I don't think there's any time that advocacy should not be, you know, ongoing. It just depends on the situation, you know, and who is better able to advocate for that child.
So we should instill in them the need to speak up for themselves when necessary.
Absolutely.
That's what I get. Absolutely. Right? Okay. Absolutely. So Dr. Evans?
No, I totally agree. And one thing I would like to add to that is, because I also have 2 little ones. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And as early as I possibly could, give them opportunities to practice advocating for themselves, but not only practicing the action of advocacy, but also labeling it so that they understood when they were advocating for themselves. So I would, let's say the example she gave, when a child, they're fighting and somebody's not sharing a toy, and they would come run to me, and I was like, well, go advocate for yourself. If you want your toy, go advocate for it. And I would make sure to use that language with them so that they understood what they were doing. And then giving them, we call them in the classroom sentence stems, but giving them sentences that they could use as they practice, because they may not have that confidence initially or have the language to actually go and advocate for themselves. So we would practice, and I would tell them, like, if someone takes a toy from you and you would like to play with it, or you were playing with it, then you say, you know, hey, I was playing with that, may I please have it back? And we would practice that. And then, like, until they learned how to, give it their own flavor or spice, their own personality, they would verbatim say those same words until they, really got a hang of it on their own. And the same thing in my classroom. When my students would need help, I always told them, I don't read minds. The only way that I know that you need help is when you advocate for yourself, when you sit and recognize I can't do this. And that symbol of you raising your hand and saying, I need help, is you speaking up for yourself, you demanding that someone comes in and interjects so that you can be successful for the goal you set for yourself. So I would just add that, I agree, there is no age limit of when they can start or when it ends, but if as much as we can, give them the opportunities to practice in a safe space so that we build that confidence and give them the language of what they're doing.
I want to stress something there that you said, give them the opportunity to practice in a safe space. And that safe space to me is home. So right there in the home, you need to encourage your child to speak up for themselves. Don't shut them down. Some of us have this attitude or habit of just, you don't think they need to speak for themselves, or at home you shut them down. And then you now expect that they're going to be able to go to the society and speak for themselves. No, it's not going to happen. So it needs to start from the home. They need to start practicing advocating for themselves right from our homes. Maybe with a sibling or with you, the parent, we need to encourage them to speak up right from the home. Thank you so much.
And so I'm sorry, do you mind if I add something?
Sure.
I think what you added at the end of that too is speaking up to parents. I think that is super important because oftentimes when we are advocating, we are usually advocating with a power dynamic. And so you have to give them practice of not just advocating with peers on the same level as them, but giving them practice advocating with someone who is in a different power dynamic than themselves, because that oftentimes is just intimidating. So if you give them the opportunity to talk back to you in a respectful way, but because one day they're going to have to advocate for a raise, that's going to be a power dynamic that they're going to have to feel confident in. One day they will have to advocate for themselves in the classroom, that power dynamic between a student and a teacher. So, just not giving them practice with a peer-to-peer, a sibling that's within the same level of them, but allowing them the opportunity to speak up to you too as a parent, so that they get that confidence of, I can speak to an adult within the parameters of respect, but so I just wanted to add that when you
just made my day because I so much believe in that. We need to allow our children to talk with us, to speak with us without fear, without, oh, I don't know what's going to happen if I say this. We have to encourage them to do it. And I like the fact that you said within respect, within the framework of being respectful. That is absolutely important. But then we should not stifle them. Thank you so much. Mrs. Ogunsanyi, do you want to contribute something?
Yes, I was just going to add that I think a lot of us with our African background, we need to move away from the culture of speaking you can't speak, because that's what the children see, that's what they take out of the home. And that's what sometimes it leads to abuse, because they've been told to not speak when an adult is talking. So it's just to understand our culture and just have that culture shift to encourage and empower our children to be able to speak their minds with respect.
I like that culture shift. We need to have that culture shift, because if you're going to expect or empower your child to speak up for themselves outside, you need to give them the opportunity to do so at home. They need to start with you. They should be confident enough to air their views with you, the parent. So African parents or other parents who believe a child should always be quiet, don't speak except I speak to you, or every opportunity that the child has to say something, you see it as talking back and you don't want them to talk back. That's not true. It does not mean they're talking back. We need to give them the opportunity. Thank you so very much. Thank you. So my next question is, do you think, or do you believe that having a good relationship with a teacher, now I'm coming to the school system, now advocating in the school system, do you think that having a good teacher-parent relationship impacts our ability to advocate in any way?
talking from my own experience, we have really good teachers. We have some that could learn a thing or two. I'm not going to call them bad teachers. I just want to, say that there's still some things for them to learn. So one thing I've always done, and I think my children's teachers realized this very, very early on. I mean, I'm in a 2-parent family. I know some people are in a 1-parent family, but it doesn't matter. There's no teacher-parent meeting that myself or my husband missed. I would say from kindergarten up to grade 12. I know my son, when he was in grade 12, got really upset. Why do you have to come? I said, I have to come because I'm your parent. I'm paying your fees. So I will be there. But at some point, my son wanted to, not have us come, but he knew that there was no way he was going to be living in our house and we're not going to be face to face with their teachers. So we established that rapport with the teachers very early on. And that was all through high school. So having a good relationship with teachers meant that, they know that we're involved. So if there were issues, it was thought of and it was resolved very, very quickly. Brings me to a story. So my son, I think, was in grade 4 at that time. And the teacher, wrote a letter home because he knew that we're involved. Your son is sleeping in class. And to me, it was like, he's sleeping in class. What's going on? So immediately my head was, okay, is he playing video games? I know he doesn't have a job. He was only like 9 or 10 years old. So why would he be sleeping in class? But I did not sweep that under the rug. So, and the reason she reached out was because she knew that we were there every parent teachers meeting. So I told, my son then, what's going on? I don't know. So why are you sleeping in class? So I said, okay, I'm going to send a note to your teacher. So I did send a note to the teacher and I said, I would like to see you. So we sat down, we talked. And then there was one thing she said, she said, sometimes that even if he's sleeping, when you ask him a question, he answers right away that and then he answers the question. So I said, okay, what does that mean? What's going on with him then? And she was like, okay, maybe I just don't know. So let's figure it out. So we started talking to my son. She started talking to him as well. And what we realized at the end of the day was my son was just super bored. Like he was maybe advanced for the class and what they were teaching. And because he wasn't learning anything, he started sleeping. And this teacher in grade 4, I would say, had a huge impact on my son's life. Because once we were able to figure out that was the problem with him, so what she started to do was to give him more work in class. So when other children were learning this, he was learning something else. Guess what? He stopped sleeping, and then she even went further and further and encouraged him and challenged him. So I would say that relationship that I had with her was the reason why we're able to, figure out what was going on with my son. Because if not, one less child to deal with, pack him on one side, and that would have been it. So I think as parents, right from a very, very young age, we have to be involved. We have to go for meetings. Like the poll said, we cannot be late. We cannot be late for meetings. We cannot reschedule last minute. Sometimes things happen, but we have to be respectful of the teachers because that's how they translate that to our children.
You see as an absent parent and it transfers to your child. Okay, this parent doesn't care about their child. Why should I?
Why should I care? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Evans?
I agree. The more open the communication is, the earlier you can start the communication, the better. So some tips, just as an educator that I liked when parents did with me, as well as things that I now do with my children. I try to tell teacher or my families, how I am as a teacher. I try to talk about what my communication style is, what my preferred communication style was. I asked parents what their preferred communication style is so that we could all, we could meet somewhere in the middle. If your preferred communication style is email and mine was face-to-face, but you have your work schedule is opposite of the school hours, let's try to figure out how we could work that out. But having that conversation at the beginning of the school year so that the teacher can then, move forward operating in the way that is best for you, that gives them the opportunity to meet the needs that you have for your student. But then I also, speaking on advocacy, I think it is really important when you sit down at that beginning of the school year with each of your children's teachers or child's teachers, to talk about them. That is one of the very purest ways that you can start to advocate for them, is to give as much information, good and bad, about your child so that they are aware and can start to make those necessary adjustments for your child. I'm thinking about my daughter's pre-K registration form asked about what are your students' strengths, what are your student weaknesses? And initially I was like, I don't want to put any weaknesses. My baby girl doesn't have anything wrong with her. But then I was like, okay, Amber, that's not going to help Reagan, and that's not going to help the teacher meet Reagan's needs. So I was like, I put on there, she can be sensitive. So she's going to need help growing in the area of just letting stuff roll off. If someone said something that doesn't, feel really kind in her heart, she might start crying. And I just want to warn you now. That way the teacher now knows how to work with Reagan when she gets in class. She knows what she needs to teach her and work with her. And that was my way of advocating for her so that she's not pushed off in the corner as some crybaby who's always crying. But now I've told the teacher this so that she's aware of it and can start to work with her ahead of time, or something that she can now plan for. And so I just piggybacking off of what Ms. Moji already said, I think one of the greatest things you can do in the very start of advocating for your child with the new teacher is be upfront and talk about those strengths and weaknesses as much as you can so that that teacher can then prepare accordingly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's important to give enough information to the teachers so that they know how best to help our child, or our children. If they don't know, they can't do anything about it. So that's absolutely true. So my next question is, so we have established the fact that it's absolutely necessary for us to have a good parent-teacher interaction in order to better help our child. Now, I want to come to something, maybe I would say stereotyped, minorities, especially Blacks. We know that many minorities, people of color, are excluded. Sometimes in some school systems, their special needs or special interests are not factored into things. How can parents advocate in this regard without necessarily playing the race card?
I can start with this one. One, I think in some situations, though the race card has a negative connotation, in many situations, that's exactly what it is. My child needs to be, you need to know this because my child is Black. My child comes from a different culture. And so I think sometimes we try to tiptoe around it and it doesn't need to be tiptoed. Sometimes you just have to lay it out there for them. My kids have, and unfortunately, but I mean, it is what it is. That's what the teaching population looks like. They've only had white female teachers their entire educational careers thus far. When they were in pre-K, I really didn't say much about it, didn't think much about it. But as my son is now getting closer to like testing grades, he's getting older, he's now in the gifted program, I am very intentional about saying to them, as soon as we meet that first time, he needs to see representation, positive representation of Black families, Black culture, Black students, Black leaders in everything that you're teaching. I want to make sure that they know what my expectations are for the experience that I want my son to have. And so I think that rather than thinking of it as the race card, you're advocating for your child to have the same type of opportunities that a white Anglo-Saxon student would have. They go into a school system and they are often privy with the experience of seeing themselves reflected in the curriculum. And you're simply telling them, I have that same expectation for my student. I expect for their culture to be valued in the classroom. I expect for you to understand where they're coming from. And I'll even give you a couple nuggets of what's different about our culture that you need to be aware of, so that you understand when he speaks this way, when he talks to his friends this way, he's simply being a little Black boy. And so I think that it's really important for us to help educators who may look different than us or come from a different background than us, rather that's a regional background, socioeconomic status differences, whatever that is, and helping them break down those barriers of not understanding our children. And that's one way of advocating for them, is asking for them to ensure that our children have equitable opportunities to experience education that reflects their cultural backgrounds.
Awesome. Before I let Miss Moji speak, I want to piggyback, because I like, and I totally agree with what you've said. But my question is, have you ever had anyone push back at you? Like you've said that your children have had mostly white teachers. Has anyone, pushed back and said, hey, that's not my job, or something like that? Because sometimes many of us, and I'll say this, I'm a very, very involved parent from whenever my kids start going, even from daycare. But some teachers don't want to give you that opportunity. They do this kind of, just stay in your lane and let me stay in my lane. And sometimes some of us Black families, but Black parents, we kind of tiptoe around it. We tiptoe around the issues because you don't want to be labeled wrongly. So have you had anybody push back at you? And then what would be the best way to do this so that you don't create, something unfortunate that will not work in the interest of your child eventually?
Thankfully, I haven't had any pushback. And I definitely, like I said before, was one of those parents who did tiptoe around it. And through my dissertation process and my research, I have become way more vocal about the experiences and injustices of the education system. And so now I do try to find ways to talk to teachers about it up front. And so I haven't, because most of them think that they're already doing it. So what I've actually found, more than someone pushing back and saying that's not my job, is like, oh yeah, we already have that. We already have books in the classroom that have multicultural. And after some time, I might have to come back and give them more resources, or more like, that quite wasn't what I was talking about. I'm not just asking for books that have pictures of little Black kids in it. I'm asking for you to think about, okay, when you're studying in social studies, are you only highlighting white figures? And then, or are we only talking about the same Black figures over and over every year? So what I try to do, thankfully, because that was something I was doing in the classroom, and I know that this is not always applicable for parents, but I would try to give them resources. Like I would either try to hey, you could try to talk about this person. He's reading about him. He really loves him. He could probably even teach your class about him. Or I would think about they just had a cultural day where they invited families to come in and talk about their cultures and stuff. That might be another opportunity where, rather than thinking that the teacher will go out and do that research on their own, you might just, hey, is there a day that I can come and talk to the kids and show them a couple things, where because I think that kind of takes the weight off of them of thinking that there's one more thing they have to go and do. But offer yourself, because that's one way that you can be involved, and you're not only being involved, but you're also advocating and educating at the same time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Miss Moji, what do you say?
Yes, I'm going to go at this from another angle. I know everything that Dr. Evers said definitely is important, in the school system. For me, it's looking at our Black kids and just saying, the unconscious bias, that comes from the teachers. And sometimes I wonder, are they even aware of what they're doing, or is this so inbuilt in their psyche that they don't even know that they're doing this? So, I look at my children, I have 3 of them. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, they also grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. My son was the only Black kid in his grade from, in high school, from grade 9 to 12. And he was the only Black kid but he was also in the advanced placement program. So for him, they look at him and immediately is like, what are you doing here, right? Because he doesn't fit the stereotype that, oh, he cannot be smart, so he should not be here. Even with my daughter, it's the same thing. And I recall going to a parent-teachers meeting, and this was my daughter that was like leading the class in I think this was grade 10. So she had the top mark in physics, and I went for a parent-teachers meeting. And the teacher was like, oh, she's so good in sciences, she's so good in this, and the next thing that came out of her mouth was, oh, I'm sure there will be some like good, maybe, personal support worker or, or maybe a nurse, and to me, I'm thinking, why was that the first thing that came out of your mouth? Why was it not, oh, she'll make a good doctor? Why are you trying to, lower my child's expectations for herself? If she was white and she was leading the whole class in physics, will your question to her be, oh, you might, be, somebody? So I did not. And for me, one thing I will say as an advice to parents, I don't get emotional. Like I'm very, very calm. I have this Zen-like nature, but then I'll say what exactly I want to say, and you will know what I'm trying to tell you. So because I look at the issues, I don't say, oh, you're doing this because she's Black. Of course, I know within me that's what you're thinking. So for me, I said, oh, she actually, wants to be a doctor in the future. So, oh, wow, But the one thing I noticed was that her attitude changed going forward with her. She started to pay more attention to her and and then every time we met, they'd be, oh, she's so smart. She's so smart. I'm like, oh, really? That's good. So for me, it's that unconscious bias that we need to be mindful of. And I want to say some of them are not even aware, but immediately they see like a Black kid, all they think about is that this is your barrier. This is how high you can go. So it's our responsibility as parents, number one, to tell our kids how high they can go, as high as they want, right? So, but it's also to let the teachers know that we don't joke with our children's education. Yeah, the color of their skin is different, but that does not mean that I don't have high goals. And I tell you that once that translates to them, the teachers, things change, right? So, and then we empower our children as well, to keep doing the best, and to prove them wrong that, hey, me being Black does not mean that, I'm a, lower grade student. So I just wanted to have a different perspective on that.
Thank you so much. And I totally agree with you because my daughter went through the same thing, kind of like, even though she went to a private school, and then when it came to picking, a private high school, and then when it came to choosing colleges, there was this teacher that was trying to tell her, even though she was taking so many AP classes and she was always, like she was in the honor roll and everything, and she was still trying to tell her what colleges she should be looking at, and trying to, like you said, lower the barrier for her. And she sent me that email, and I respectfully said, well, that may be your opinion, but I happen to know that my daughter can do well looking at these other colleges. And I put a list of the colleges that we're actually looking at. And I said, for your information, none of the colleges you listed or suggested, none of them is on our list. And I put a list of the colleges we were looking at. Fast forward 4 years after, when my daughter graduated from Wake Forest, this teacher was one of the first people on LinkedIn to identify and say, oh, we're so very proud of you. You've always made us proud. We knew you would go this far. We knew you would go for that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if my daughter sees this, she's going to go off on this person, So like Miss Moji said, you have to let them know, no, we're not settling that low. No, that's not where we're heading. We're heading this way, and let them know, and their perspective would change. Their perspective has to change. Thank you so much. So my next question. So we've talked about race. How about special needs? How about children who do actually have special needs? Some of them are maybe health or maybe even cognitive. How do we approach that? How do we advocate for such children? And what would be the best way to go about it? Do we have to divulge everything? Like, I know there's privacy, HIPAA and all of that. How far do we go? We know we have to give teachers enough information in order to help them. How do we balance privacy and yet giving enough information in order for the teacher to be able to help our child the most? Any one of you can take that first.
Yeah, I can start because I have personal experience with that. So my second son has special needs, and it's something that we have definitely dealt with from when he was very young. I would say I learned very, very fast to advocate for my son, because even from, I think he was about age 1+, when as a parent, you kind of know when there's something going on. But every time we went to the doctor, the doctor was always like, oh, you're just so dramatic. There's nothing wrong with him. But as a parent, I knew that he was not developing as fast or as quickly as my older son. So, but I did not stop there, because as far as the doctor was concerned, there was nothing wrong with him. So that was my first instance of advocating for my son, because I realized that even though you're a medical doctor, you're supposed to be a professional, but you don't know what you're talking about, because I'm telling you, my son needs further help. After a while, I realized that, okay, there's something going on here. So I moved on and got another doctor. And it was this doctor that kind of, all the strengths and all the gains that my son made, it was because these things were identified when he was very, very young, and were able to put things in place to help him. With my son, as the years go by, in school, anywhere, in the playground. So what I needed to do as a parent was, number one, got myself educated. So that when I'm in the midst of people and they're talking, I'm not lost. I am the one actually saying, oh, have you read this? Have you read that? Oh, I read somewhere about this and they said this is what we're supposed to do. So with these teachers, there's advocating, because if they have their way, who wants to do extra work? Right? Having a kid with special needs in your class is extra work. So, but one thing I did tell myself was, I read about the law, and I was not, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not immune to throwing around a few, oh, you're discriminating against my son because of his special needs. And you find them, they hate the word discrimination, and I said, okay, we have to make accommodation. So I hit all the buzzwords. Oh yeah, you are discriminating, you have to, accommodate him. And, sometimes the law says, you have to provide reasonable accommodation. So I will educate you on what is reasonable. So for me, it's saying that, okay, I have a son with special needs, but also my goals for him in life is for him to be the best version of himself. And so what does that mean? And how do you help him as an educator? How do you, his doctor, help him? How do you as a therapist help him? So it's knowing and talking about that all the time. My son could not advocate for himself. Oh yeah, I mean, if he didn't want to do anything, there was nothing you could do. I guess that was a form of advocacy, because he knew how to say no. And his no was loud and clear. But at the same time as well, things that were good for him that he didn't necessarily want to do at that time, he wouldn't want to do it. So as a parent then, it was my responsibility to ensure that everybody that needed to be in the room as far as this matter was in the room, right? So we've talked about that so many times here. All children need advocacy, but I think especially for kids with special needs, the parents, needs to be upfront, needs to ensure taking out emotions. I think that's one thing I've always learned. Taking out the emotions, stick to the facts. Just say this and this this is my expectation. I know for you want to put my son in a corner, but that's not going to happen. On the playground, putting him in sports, there definitely has to be some accommodation, because even I remember then my son, okay, everybody line up, he's lining up, but then he's like that, like, where am I? Like he's turning around. But at the end of the day, having people who believe in him, who looks past his disability, and see that he has a future and he has a right to a future, just like any normal kid.
Absolutely. I totally get you, because one, every child, irrespective of where they stand or where they come from, has the right to a future. I like that phrase. They have the right to a future, and they have the right to demand that people help them get to that future, especially people who are supposed to be, playing that role for them. And I appreciate your candid thoughts. Dr. Evans?
Yeah, I think for me, when thinking about advocacy for students with special needs and that balance between you mentioned privacy and sharing with the teachers, I do think that degree, it's like I was mentioning earlier, as much as you can share about your student, go ahead and share that. And then like Ms. Moji was saying, and then share what your expectations are, regardless of whatever those things are that you share. You are sharing this so that you are aware and that you can make those necessary accommodations. And those accommodations should align with the expectations I still have for him this year or this lifetime and things of that such. So, and I like that she said taking those emotions out of it, because it can be emotional when you are trying to advocate for someone in such a vulnerable position. Like she said, that oftentimes people want to disregard, do the lesser work, but just remembering to take those emotions out of it, stick to the facts. And I totally agree with doing the research and becoming well versed in the things that they need to know, that you need to know about that, because so often some people do know that you may not understand what the laws are regarding this population of people, and they take advantage of that. So taking the time to educate yourself so that you can become an even more powerful advocate for your student is probably one of the best things you could do. So I just really second everything she said about that.
And sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah, if I may add, and I'm talking to us as African parents, because I've come across, in my son's journey, I've come across many parents who are in denial. Advocacy is good, but you also have to understand there is a problem. So a lot of people, and especially there's like a whole genre. Some children have learning disabilities that if not if not thought of like from the very young age, it can go on to have lasting effects. But a lot of parents, just dig their heads in the sand. Oh, there's nothing wrong with my son. And sometimes it's with the privacy issues. We just want to hide things. We don't want people to know. But my son, we have what we call in Canada individual education plan, right? And it's for special needs, it's for kids who are struggling. But you find that some parents, just because they don't want that label, be like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with my son. And for me, I'm the one saying, label him. Just give him anything you want to call him, just so he can get the help. Because then my son is doing well now because he got the help when he was much younger.
And he got it on time.
He got it on time. So I would say that for us parents, we have to be really, really careful. Let's not put too much emphasis on labels, but let's just make sure that our kids get the help that they need, just so that their future is better and secure.
Thank you so much. And I want to bring attention to something that you said. Learn all you can. Learn, like when you have a situation, make sure you go in as well informed as you possibly can be, so that when you start discussing with them, you can give them enough information. If you have to read up stuff, if like sometimes when I talk with parents, they say, oh, are you an educator yourself? Or are you a child psychologist? No, I read. Google is my best friend. I go in there, I read, I know, okay, what should I be talking about? What does this imply? 5 years from now, what should I be expecting, And so that when you're going in, you don't go talk with them from a blank mind. Mm-hmm. Because the way you present yourself also determines how they're going to respond to you. So please, parents, learn as much as you can about any situation that you find, maybe with your child or something, or even yourself, so that you are able to correctly articulate the situation. And while they are thinking and scratching their head, you can say, hey, I already found out that this doctor said that, I read this research said this, or I read something about our school system. Like I would go for the school district meetings. I will go for school meetings. I'll go for school district meetings because I want to know what they're saying. They'll say, oh, because of title this and title that, we are only limited to this. I want to understand what that title, whatever is. What does it allow me to do? What does it allow the parents to do? What does it allow the child to do? Or what does it allow the teachers to do? So that nobody can lie or hide behind misinformation, to deprive you or deprive your child of something that they should really be giving you. Parents, let's get information. So my next question, and probably my last one before we go to the chat room, is other than in the school system, where else? What are the other places that we should be advocating for our children? What are the other places?
Everywhere, in the healthcare system, in communities, in sports, in education, in your home, everywhere. I know, like, I constantly am like, Yes, advocate for them in every space, because like we have already said, children are, if not always, they are most often the most vulnerable populations because they are so easily taken advantage of. Rather that may be taking advantage of them mentally, socially, physically, but it's because so many people look at children as not knowing, and they in many ways they don't know about a lot of things, that people take advantage of that and misuse, misteach them. So we have to be able to advocate for them in all, from the smallest things to the biggest things. And that was one of the things that, like, listening to us talk, and I think we kind of hit that a little bit earlier, advocacy doesn't always have to be this grand gesture about this huge like social injustice. Advocacy can be something as simple as, you know, you think about people advocating for their kids to get more playing time on a sports game, or in healthcare when you're thinking about, you know, I've told you that my daughter keeps having this reoccurring pain and I need you to do something about it. Like, you know, or in the community advocating that there are places for your child to go and feel safe after school, going to the library and advocating for more children's books that reflect your child. There's so many different things that our children need advocacy for, and in so many different spaces that they need advocacy for.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're going to go to the chat now, to the chat room. I have been told that we have quite a few questions from there. So we're going to take questions from the chat room and allow our parents to ask their questions directly.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to applaud both speakers and also our great moderator. It's been so enlightening, so enlightening. Thank you so much. We had Ella's hand up right when you started. So I don't know if Ella, you'd like to go ahead and ask your question or make your contribution now, please, before we go to the questions in the chat.
So I was actually raising up my hand when they were talking about children talking back when their parents are talking. And when one of the speakers actually said we should always allow our kids to always talk back. We shouldn't think they are actually talking back. We should just let it feel like they are actually contributing. But what I actually wanted to put in then is just that even when we want them to contribute to what we are saying, we should always allow something we call moderacy. And along the line, discipline. We can take the fact that we're from African, we can take it, and we have culture, we have some things. I know there are some things we have to take away, but even with that, we should still give them that moral. So that was what I was actually talking, as in letting them talk when it is the right time to talk. When you finish talking, you can also allow them, let them pour out their mind, let them say how they feel about it, not shutting them. We should learn from shutting them down and also letting them to contribute. Thank you.
I would just like to say, I tell people that all the time. My husband and I grew up in very different households. He did not get the opportunity to speak up or speak back or whatever at all. And then marrying him as an adult who did not know how to advocate for himself was very frustrating. Because like Ms. Moji said earlier, what we teach them now are going to have lasting effects. What we advocate for them now are going to have lasting effects for them as they grow older. And I remember him thinking that I was talking back to my mom when he would come over, because we are high school sweethearts. And he was just like so confused, like, how are you talking to her like that? And I was like, all I said was I didn't want that for dinner. Like, why is that so crazy for you? And so like convincing him that our kids needed that space. If I said, hey, we're cooking blah, blah, blah for dinner, and they say, I don't want that, like getting him to understand, like, they're not trying to be rude. They're just simply saying, I don't want that. Now, I may still say, well, sorry, that's what we're having, but they still had the opportunity to say how they were feeling about the situation, regardless of what my next steps were. They still had that opportunity and space. So I think that's something that's also really important. When we say give them that opportunity, it doesn't mean that they now have, the end all be all and they are making the decisions. It's just giving them the practice, and they might have to also practice knowing you said it, but it's still no, or you said it, but it doesn't really matter. I'm still moving forward this way, because that's also a part of their realities as adults, that they're not going to always get the yes just because they voice themselves. So it's okay to give them the opportunity to voice themselves, but still you make that final call.
And also the respect, the respect part of it. I think as every society, there should be respect. So even as Africans, we have to instill that culture of respect in our children. We give them the opportunity to talk back. Maybe talk back is not the right word. We give them the opportunity to have a conversation with us, to respond, but at the same time, we should never, ever take away the respect part of it. It has to be done respectfully.
Thank you so much. And what I'd like to add is that I have this thing that I shared with my kids while they were much younger. And it's like, I gave them permission to call me out, but do it respectfully, and never to call me out in public. So we have that understanding. You can call me out, but do it respectfully and don't call me out in public. For instance, if we're out somewhere, my daughter knows how to pull me to the side and call my attention to something, or if we're in a meeting or something is going on and she thinks something is not going the way, So it's just, again, it's practice. You let them practice that in the house. And like Dr. Evans said, you also let them understand that they can get to say their opinion, but doesn't mean that their opinion would always be received by everybody, but they still get to have the opinion, because that's life. You are welcome to your opinions, but will your opinions always be taken by everybody? They should be comfortable with not having their opinions received totally. It's part of life, and they can also exercise that. But again, we have to establish that framework of respect, and what they see you do is what they'll pick up on over time.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now we have a request in the chat. We have, please address abusive, toxic marriages where children are exposed to this.
Yeah, so I can try to start. So I think one thing we've talked about child advocacy is the fact that what they see now, what we fail to do now, has a lasting effect on them, right? And I know in the society now, there's been a lot of conversation about, toxic relationships, having children in a home where there's a lot of abuse. Right. So as a mother, as a father, depending on where the abuse is coming from, it's the right of that parent to advocate for that child, especially with children. There's a lot of emotional problems for children who grow up in toxic relationships. They either go on to become toxic adults because that's the only life they know, right? Or they, just continue to bear it. So even when they take themselves out of that situation, they're not able to advocate for themselves anywhere in their offices, in their own marriages, because they're just not used to anybody speaking up for them. So I would say I'm not a marriage counselor, but all I know is that I don't think there's any toxic relationship that's good for the kids. So at any point in time, it's either to try to resolve this so that it does not impact the children, or maybe as parents, even try to argue where the children are not present, just to reduce the impact on their emotions. And sometimes maybe the drastic situation is to take yourself and take themselves out of that situation. It's very plain, and I know sometimes it's not that easy, but for the betterment of yourself and your children, you have to do the needful.
Thank you, Ms. Moji. Dr. Evans?
I really do agree with everything that she was saying, especially the part of, I don't believe there is any toxic situation that ever bears good fruit. So it is really important that we do. If we can't advocate, because I'm imagining if you are a victim of a toxic relationship or marriage, you probably haven't even gotten to the point where you are advocating for yourself, to then be able to advocate for others that are also getting the side effects of that abusive relationship. So finding the strength within yourself to then be able to advocate for you, and as a byproduct, you are naturally also advocating for peace for your children too. Or if you see someone suffering from an abusive relationship, and advocating for the child and just reminding them that, what they are experiencing now is going to have permanent or very long lasting effects in their life that they're going to need therapy to get through, or some type of professional support to help rebuild those skills that were lost by witnessing such a traumatic event for whatever time period that was. So yeah, there is no toxic space that is ever going to bear what we want our kids to have in the future.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to add that if there's anyone in that situation and you don't think you have the option to take yourself and your child away from the situation, please look for help. We have a lot of domestic violence crisis lines that you can call into, and they would tell you what to do. There's a lot of non-profit organizations that would work side by side with you. I know that for many women, especially, I don't know about men, I speak as a woman, for many women, the reason why they stay in is because maybe they are not economically self-sufficient enough to take themselves or their children away from that situation, and they just bear it. And while that may work for you as an adult, it's more damaging on the child. So please look for resources, reach out to us, reach out. I'm sure Dr. Evans, as an educator and as an academic coach, she has a list of resources that people can, that she can recommend, because I know educators are mandatory reporters, right? So as a mandatory reporter, I'm sure she can also, refer you to resources that can help you if you ever find yourself in that situation. That's just something I wanted to add.
Good afternoon, everyone. One, thank you for this opportunity. I have a series of questions for me. This section of today's seminar is just timely for me. So I know you've talked about a lot of things, and some of these things I see happening around so many times, where people confuse a child voicing out their opinion as being disrespectful or arguing. I know that's paramount amongst us Africans and all that. So one of my questions and concerns that I really want, that have been on my mind, it's maybe Dr. Evans will shed more light, being an educator and being in the system. Where, at what point is it too much to be like in the face of your child's teacher? Is there a point where you feel like, or where teachers feel like, okay, you're too much, you're always like coming, you're always speaking up, and does that have any effect on your child? I have a series of questions, so maybe I should just say everything once. Then at what point is it, where do you differentiate or demarcate, or you're picking on my child to, you are helping me build a child? And is there a point where you feel, because for me, I feel as educators, I'm not an educator myself, but with my little experience, I feel educators or people around children or adults should be like impactors. You impact a child, you make them feel better. So is there a place where, as educators or teachers in school, where you see yourself as helping a child be a better version of themselves, or constantly cheering your child down? Or is there a point where you feel like, okay, when you keep picking up on a child, or you keep putting all these comments for your child, do you think at one point that it impacts the way the child sees themselves or perceives themselves? Oh, because what I'm trying to understand all these things is, I'll give you like two different instances now, and I'm glad, Dr. Evans, you have a 7-year-old. That's like my children's age. So there's one, when he was in kindergarten, first grade, I've never had comments about him misbehaving and stuff, but all of a sudden in second grade, especially this semester, it's just be one thing every week. Okay, there was one time that he came home and he was like, today somebody had oranges on the table, and a child had said, I did it, but I didn't put the orange there, which I know that he didn't take orange to school, he didn't take orange to school. So initially I kept quiet, like, okay, that's not a big deal. But then he said, oh, my teacher said I should pick it up. I looked at it from the perspective of, okay, that's fine. Your teacher said you should do something, you did it, that's okay. But then, I think 2 days or 3 days afterwards, he came home and said something else again. So then I wrote a letter to an email to the teacher acknowledging the fact that, okay, thank you, and all this. My child said this, I just wanted to clarify that it was okay. He said, no, I just needed somebody to pick it up, and I asked him to pick it up. Okay, I let it go. I said, thank you for that. Then another day, maybe like a week or two thereabout, he came home and he said, the child had said, oh, I had a Pokemon card on me. And my teacher, okay, so when he came home on Friday with his chart, he had an hand saying, okay, because he was playing with Pokemon card in class, and which he didn't do. So initially I was in between, like, okay, do I go? Do I not go? Do I go? And, sometimes I'm this kind of person, I would ask around, because I always say my first is like my guinea pig. I don't know how it really operates in the school system, but I'm passionate about my children, and everything about them, go to school, I'm there. So then I asked around. Some people were like, sometimes you don't want to talk about it because, when it goes to the next class, the teacher might talk to the next teacher and things like that. So then something happened at home that he didn't do something. His brother had said he did it. I got furious. But he's this kind of person that when he says something and he doesn't do it, he will come back to you again and say, Mom, but you know what you told, what you said the other time, I didn't do it. So that night he had told me again, he said, Mommy, I didn't do it. Then I referred back to the Pokemon card in school. I said, okay, the Pokemon card in school, did you do it? He said, no. That right there and there, I went to his teacher. I asked her, did you investigate? When a student said he had it, did you look to check whether he had it? Then she said, no, that she'll work on that on her path. Okay. So at what point is it like, a child is, or you're always in the face of your child's teacher, that you're not becoming, okay, you're always picking on me, because I want to know where to draw the line. And like somebody had said, okay, I don't want anybody picking on my child, and at the same time, I want to protect my child in that space. So when is it like it's too much for a child to speak up? Like, okay, you've talked about advocating, a child can speak up for themselves, but sometimes people confuse advocating with a child is in my face or arguing with me, because somebody had told me about a teacher that used the word your child argued just because your teacher said don't do this, and said, oh, but I like to do this. Then you call it argument. So I want to know, is there a place where you draw that line that, okay, my child is speaking up for themselves, doesn't mean they're arguing or all those comments. Then where do you draw the line that you yourself, you're not saying like, okay, my child is, maybe you're bringing in racism into it? Because like you said, sometimes that your child has always been in a white teacher class, and that's the same thing with my child. He's always been in white teacher class. So I want to know where I'm not feeling like, oh, is this teacher a racist or not? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one, I don't really think there is, there's like this term in schools, the helicopter parent. And that's the person, because helicopters can hover. So that's the person who's like constantly hovering over the teacher. And I think I don't think there is necessarily too much advocating for your student if you recognize that there is some strife that is happening in the classroom. And depending on the way that you are presenting yourself, I can be honest, I think at one point you said, I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but you said like teachers are humans in front of kids. And so at the end of the day, we are still bringing our whole self, our emotions, our baggage, we try as much as we can to leave it at the door, to leave whatever happened at home, but we are still humans in the classroom. And so if we also feel like we're being picked on by parents, there are some people who may take that out on their kids, unfortunately, on their students. So when we think about like, how do we advocate that same thing of that whole idea of like, we want our kids to make sure that they're advocating or speaking up for themselves respectfully, then we want to make sure that we're presenting ourselves to teachers respectfully, and teachers are presenting themselves respectfully back. But I don't think there is like being in their face too much, especially if it is just simply responding to events that have already happened, because now you're just simply following up, and there's nothing wrong with asking follow-up questions to better understand what is happening and then what your expectations are for what is to happen next. I don't know necessarily if the child, like if your student is being picked on, it does sound like, I will say, kids, sometimes like if they do notice that a teacher is constantly calling on one particular child over another, they start to kind of pick up on that as well. And then they start using that person as their scapegoat because they already know that the teacher is going to believe whatever I say about that student. So you can, maybe bring up to them, like, I don't want this to become a situation where, everyone is using him as a scapegoat for, any incidents that happen in the classroom. So please be mindful of the way that you talk about him or reprimand him in front of everyone, because kids pick up on that. If there is an issue, please make sure you're pulling him to the side, privately reprimanding him, privately discussing with him, and please follow up with some type of note to me so that I can then support you and talk about it with him at home. I think that was, was that everything?
Yeah, and sorry, if I may just add to what you said. So one thing I want to stress is that from the conversation that you've had with the teacher, it seems like she's willing to work with you, because I think it takes a lot for a teacher to tell you that, oh, I will work on that on my part. So I think that's a very, very positive thing that maybe indicates that the teacher is, I would say, good. So it's for you as a parent to continue to have that conversation. And just like Dr. Evans said, just stick to the facts. So if there's something going on that you feel should be resolved, if it takes 20 times for you to talk, it's your child we're talking about, and it's your child's future. But at the same time, for me, at least based on what you said, it seems that the teacher might be willing to work with you if she's acknowledging that maybe she might not have handled that properly. So I would say don't stop.
Thank you.
Can I also like to add that, like Ms. Muji said, this teacher seems to be willing to work with you. What I'd like to suggest is maybe find a time when there's nothing happening, when, like a peaceful time, I would say, and then maybe set up a meeting with her or something, ask if you can just go in and, like maybe appreciate her, that kind of stuff, and then suggest to her that, I know there's maybe there's a couple of incidences and all of that, and this is the way it has rubbed off on my child. I would just like to suggest that you please take a look at this and all of that. And then I would also like to say, let's watch our tone and attitude. Sometimes the right things may go down the wrong way if we go in the heat of the moment, and then we have the wrong tone and the wrong attitude. And of course, we are parents, we are emotional, we are passionate. Every good parent is passionate about their child. So, but then you want to calm down, you want to think through this and get yourself in a place where you can go in there without emotions and then just have a meaningful conversation, point out how this event or situations have affected your child, and just basically soliciting her help in going, working with the child for the future. I'm sure that teacher would appreciate that. And even if in the back of their minds they don't, you have set the tone, the right tone, and you have set a higher expectation, and I'm sure she's going to put herself back on the right path if she had any ulterior motive prior to that conversation.
Thank you so much. I hand over to Achenyo. Achenyo has one question that she picked up from the chat.
Okay, sure. So I have a question from Ella, and I was just trying to rephrase. She's asking for some direction on an issue. She has a kid that has grades like 195, good grades in school, but it feels as if the child is not allowed into some talent events. And there was an occasion where she wanted her to join a talent debate, but they were, kind of shaking it off as something not serious. So wondering how she can tackle that. Ella, please feel free to jump in if I didn't phrase your question well.
So Evans, you want to handle that?
I'm sorry, I'll go ahead. I didn't know if she was about to speak and add anything to it.
Okay.
The talent events, like extracurricular activities, that's my only clarification I wanted. Is that like like after school activities, or is that like a gifted program? Because I know some of them are called the gifted and talented, so I wasn't sure.
No, it's not after school. I think they go outside the school to do some things, and they just told me, my daughter told me that she was supposed to be among them, but the teacher said she can't go. So I went to the school and I actually saw the receptionist, and she told me it's not something so serious, that I shouldn't bother about it.
I guess my advice would be to, like, sometimes the receptionist may not know the full capacity of these programs. So talking directly to the teacher and asking what the criteria was, so that you can understand, because it may be beyond good grades. But I'm sure, I'm not to say that like your student is missing it, but like if you know the criteria, then you are able to advocate and say, well, my student meets all of these things, and I would like for her to join them the next time they go on another event or something like that. So I would try to, thank the receptionist for the information that she gave you, but just, not demand, but say, I would prefer to speak with the teacher. And then when given the opportunity to speak with the teacher, ask for that criteria. What is it that allows certain students to be able to participate in this program? And if my student is missing that, what is it that she's missing, so that we can work on that? Because I would really like her to get this experience so that she can participate with these students and learn and, engage in these type of activities.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we are wrapping up shortly. This has been a great conversation. I want to thank both of our panelists for the awesome conversation and discussion we've had. Oh, wow, I wish we could go on and on and on, but we have to stop at some point. And I would like to just quickly go through. Dr. Evans, do you want to talk about your upcoming program? Let me share my screen and show the flyer. Thank you.
So myself and a few other researchers, or those who are also very passionate about linguistic justice, have created a linguistic justice collaborative where we are collaborating with other people around the community and bringing more awareness to linguistic justice, which is just advocating for Black and Brown students or students from different cultures or linguistic diversity, speak different languages than mainstream American English, advocating for them to have the opportunity to bring their home languages into schools without them being silenced. And so what we're doing this summer is we are partnering with DeKalb County Library, the Stone Mountain branch, and we're offering a Black English grammar school where Black adults are our primary focus. We do also have a youth program that will be partnered with us so that if you have children, they can also participate in that program while you are participating with me and one of my fellow colleagues. But we're pretty much just going to talk about what is Black English, and what Black language is and what it means to us as a people. How is it embedded within our culture? What does it mean for our identity? And then even more so, what do we want that to look like for our community and our children as they continue through life and through school? Because too often how we speak, there's this theory of ratiolinguistics, which gives this has a theory that race and language is intertwined, meaning that how we are heard is based off of our race. So even if we are on the phone and without seeing who we are, if we are speaking in a certain manner that does not align with mainstream American English, we are already being judged. And oftentimes that is more harsher for people of color, specifically Black people. So we're just trying to dismantle this stigma that how we talk is wrong, that it is in any way not appropriate for professional or school settings, but instead figure out ways that we can allow for diverse languages to be present and accepted within these different settings so that our children aren't silenced when they go to school. So yeah, this program is allowing for us to have these kind of conversations that we did today, where we're going to just learn more about what this is and how important it is to sustain it within our cultures, or in our communities, but even more so, what can we do to advocate for ourselves and our communities and our culture and our kids so that they can live a life where they're not silenced because of how they speak or judged because of how they speak.
Thank you so much. So how can people register for this? Can they just, I just put your email and
Yes.
your Facebook. So can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me. It looks like it's cut off a little bit at the bottom, but I can also put the link in the chat where you can visit our website. And on our website, there is actually a series of different workshops that you can join throughout the year. And you can register for whichever ones you like. I would love to see you guys at the Black Language Grammar School. So I will go ahead and get that link and drop it in the chat.
Thank you so much. Awesome. So that's for those who would like to join. It's Saturdays, June 4th through July 9th, and they don't have to attend all, right? They can pick whichever one they are able to attend, right?
Sorry, I had to get back to the screen. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. I'm also going to put two resources here And one is about the Clifton Strength Assessment Strength. I don't know how many of us know about that. I think that is something that you can use to understand yourself as well as understand your child. And once you're able to understand your child, you'll be able to advocate for them more. It's a shame, but some of us parents don't really, we think we do know our children because we live at home with them, but sometimes we don't. I found that assessment, strength assessment, is a good way to understand yourself, to understand your child. And I think a basic assessment is about maybe $20, and they give you a report, and it's really very good. So that's something I would recommend. There's also this website called understood.org. It's about people who don't fit into our mold, understanding people with high IQ, for instance, understanding people with excellent cognitive abilities. And then, of course, the other end of the spectrum, understanding people with special needs, understanding people with ADHD. I've found that website has a lot of materials that we can learn from, because to the extent that we understand our children, the better we can advocate for them and also help others understand them. Because if you understand your child, you can say to the teacher, like Dr. Evans said, that she was filling the form for her daughter and was asking for strengths and weaknesses. Can you truthfully fill that kind of a form, and can you really say you understand your child? So I just wanted to put those resources there for anybody that might be interested, in checking them out. So we have come to the...
Sorry, Sister Bola, there's a quick question. What age can the child take the Clifton assessment?
I'm not sure. I didn't check for a child, but I think it's something that you would see on the website. If you go there, it would tell you, the age limits. So I think that's something you can research. And if I find out, I might include it in our next email or something, and give more specific information there. So we have come to the end of today's webinar. I just wanted to thank everybody that was able to join us. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining. We hope you have gained some new insights. We hope you have a better understanding of how to advocate for your child, and even maybe advocate for yourself. I've been known to speak up for myself. I'm one that is never afraid. I don't care if you are the director, if you are the CEO. If I have something to say, I'm going to find a way to say it. I may refine it, I may polish it, I may wrap it, in between two layers or whatever, but I'm going to let you know that this is how I feel about it, or this is how you are robbing me, that kind of a thing. So, and it's nothing wrong, but we just need to know how to do it and do it effectively. So please follow us on our social media pages. You can see them on the screen. Parenting Resources and Initiatives, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And please go to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of materials there that we have recorded from previous sessions that will be useful to you. And of course, please save the date. Our next webinar is May 21, 2022, and it's going to be on parenting styles. That's something you want to find out. What style are you using? Are you a passive parent, or are you a passive aggressive? Are you an aggressive parent? What's your style? You want to come in and join us on that day. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be educative. Again, I want to thank Ms. Ogunsoya and Dr. Evans for spending their time with us today. Awesome. You guys did a wonderful job. I look forward to reaching out to you for resources or having you on another session. Thank you so much. We're glad you could make it. We're glad, we appreciate all the insights you shared. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.